poor young student had a one-night stand with a millionaire to pay his mother's medical bills. When Sarah looked at the hospital bill in her hands, her heart almost stopped. There were 3 pages of numbers that seemed to jump off the page, each figure more frightening than the last. Her mother, lying in bed in room 14, at St. Mary's Hospital in Chicago, was in dire need of treatment, and Sarah didn't have a penny left in her pocket. It was in this moment of absolute desperation that she made a decision that would change her life forever. If you want to find out what Sarah did to save her mother, like and subscribe now to follow this story to the end. Sarah Mitchell was 22 years old and studying business at the University of Illinois, but her life was far from the typical routine of a college student. He lived in a small rented apartment in Oak Park with his mother, Clara, who had been diagnosed with a rare heart disease and needed expensive treatment that health insurance partially covered. Between paying rent, buying groceries, and taking care of his mother, each month was a silent and heavy battle. She worked part-time as a waitress at a local cafe, but wages barely covered basic expenses. The last bill from the hospital had arrived on Tuesday morning. Sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by receipts and medical folders, Sarah felt a knot in her stomach. The tears began to flow, but she held back. I couldn't cry now. I needed a solution. On the same day, she received an unexpected message from Alex Donovan, a businessman known in Chicago for his fortune and extravagant lifestyle. They had met a few weeks earlier at a university benefit party, where Alex made generous donations and was surrounded by journalists and onlookers. Sarah didn't remember much about that night, but Alex clearly did. The message was direct. Do you want to meet tonight to talk? I have a proposal. Sarah hesitated. Talking meant going out with him alone in an expensive restaurant. But when looking at the hospital bill, any hesitation disappeared. She knew she had no choice. In the evening, she walked into the elegant restaurant in downtown Chicago, dressed discreetly, but in a way that didn't draw attention to her empty pocket. Alex was already waiting at a table in the corner, smiling confidently, wearing a perfectly fitted suit. He greeted her with a firm handshake and led her to sit down. They talked about trivialities in the first few minutes: the weather, the city, social events. Sarah noticed that he watched every detail of her carefully, but without trespassing. Then, finally, he got straight to the point. Sarah, he said, lowering his voice, I know you are going through hardships, and I want to help you. There's a quick way to fix this, but it's something that requires trust and discretion. Sarah's heart raced. She knew that any decision she made there could change her life forever. She swallowed hard and asked, What kind of help? Alex smiled slightly and replied, One night with me. Nothing more. I cover all of your mom's medical bills, no questions asked. Sarah felt the world spin. The proposal was unexpected, shocking, but the weight of responsibility on her mother spoke louder than any modesty. She knew she couldn't refuse. In less than 5 minutes, they had agreed on the details: discreet, fast, and the money would be transferred as soon as the night was over. As she left the restaurant, Sarah felt a mixture of fear, guilt, and relief. She had made the hardest decision of her life, but for the first time in weeks, she felt hope that her mother could receive the treatment she needed. When he returned home, he sat next to his mother, who was fast asleep. She held her hand and silently promised, I'll work it out, Mom. I promise. That night, as the clock ticked down, Sarah prepared for the rendezvous with quiet determination. Every detail of her outfit, every gesture, every word had been carefully planned. He knew that after that night, nothing would be the same as before. When Sarah arrived at Alex Donovan's apartment, she felt that knot in her stomach again. The place was modern, luxurious, with panoramic views of downtown Chicago. Every detail betrayed wealth: Italian furniture, contemporary artwork, carefully planned lighting. But Sarah could not be distracted by this. His goal was clear: to secure the money for his mother's treatment. Alex greeted her at the door with a quiet smile, without any judgment or comment. The atmosphere was strangely neutral, almost professional, as if it were just a negotiation. He led her into a spacious and elegant hall, offering wine and chatting quietly, as if they were coworkers discussing a project. Sarah realized that even though everything was wrapped in richness and sophistication, Alex had a quiet respect. There was no rush, there was no intimidation, just an implicit confidence that they both knew exactly what was going on and what the limit was that night. After a few minutes of conversation, Sarah felt a tightness in her chest. The reality of the situation hit her hard. She was about to do something she never imagined she would do, driven only by love and responsibility for her mother. She took a deep breath, trying to separate her feelings from the practical need that drove her there. The night went as planned. It was quick, quiet, and without great words, but the emotional impact for Sarah was profound. As she left Alex's apartment, the cold of the Chicago dawn hit her face, bringing a strange mixture of relief and guilt. I knew I had solved a problem, but at the same time I felt a weight that I couldn't ignore. The next morning, as promised, Sarah received the transfer of the amount needed to cover all of her mother's medical bills. She looked at her bank statement with teary eyes, feeling a wave of relief so intense that it almost made her faint with excitement. Finally, Clara could receive the treatment without financial obstacles. However, Sarah also realized that with money came new complexities. She had to deal with her own conscience, the fear of being judged by friends or family, and the emotional impact of what she had just done. Although no one knew it, the feeling of vulnerability was present in her every gesture and thought. Over the next few days, Sarah began to notice small changes in her routine and interactions with Alex. He sent her short messages, asking how she was, if her mother was better, but always keeping the appropriate distance. For Sarah, this was comforting and disturbing at the same time. She felt a strange gratitude and, at the same time, a quiet tension. She returned to university, trying to resume her normal routine. Classes, work, and studies, however, could not occupy her mind completely. Each notification on the phone was a reminder of Alex and the night before. The weight of the decision was still there, but there was also something unexpected, a sense of quiet power. For the first time, Sarah felt she had control over a situation that could have destroyed her family. Meanwhile, Clara, the mother, began treatment and responded well to the first sessions. Sarah felt a genuine joy that outweighed any guilt. She watched her mother smile again, see her health improve, and realized that what she had done, although painful, had a purpose that was worth every emotional sacrifice. It was during this period of adaptation that Sarah began to notice something curious. Alex Donovan didn't just seem interested in delivering on his financial promise. He showed genuine attention, even in subtle gestures. It wasn't romance, it wasn't flirting, but a strange, almost silent form of care. He checked if she was well, asked about her mother, and even sent small, encouraging messages about her studies. Sarah was surprised by this. She didn't expect any form of personal consideration, but she began to feel that there was something more behind Alex's initial coldness. It wasn't emotional intimacy, but rather a kind of quiet respect that she didn't know how to interpret. Despite everything, she kept her distance. He knew that any deeper involvement could complicate his life, especially now that his mother was recovering. Her every decision had to be measured carefully, and at the same time, she couldn't ignore the growing curiosity about who Alex really was beyond the public image of a wealthy and successful businessman. Sarah continued to attend university, working in the cafe and taking care of her mother. But a question began to arise, slowly and silently, in his mind. What if there was something more to that relationship? Something that had not been planned or foreseen? She didn't know yet that this question would be the beginning of a series of events that would put her life on an unexpected path, revealing secrets and choices she had never imagined facing. In the weeks following the decisive night, Sarah began to feel the effects of her choice in different areas of life. Each morning was a mixture of relief, anxiety, and quiet reflection. Her mother, Clara, already showed visible signs of improvement. The treatment was advancing and the doctors were optimistic. However, the sense of accomplishment was accompanied by a silent guilt, a constant reminder of the personal price she had paid. At university, Sarah carefully resumed her routines, but something had changed. Before, work, Classes and studies were enough to fill his day. Now, every gesture, every look, seemed to carry an additional weight. She noticed curious looks from colleagues, some surprised by subtle changes in her behavior. More confidence, more determination, but also a quiet caution that no one could explain. Meanwhile, Alex continued to appear in discreet, almost imperceptible ways. She sent short messages, asking about her mother, about classes, and even offering small financial advice, always carefully, without pressuring Sarah. There was no imposition, there was no expectation beyond what they had agreed upon, but he seemed interested in keeping an open line of communication. Sarah, for her part, avoided any unnecessary contact. He knew he couldn't get emotionally involved. The situation was complex enough. However, in moments of vulnerability, she found herself thinking about him, trying to understand the person behind the image of a powerful and distant businessman. Not only was he wealthy, but there was a strange combination of intelligence, discretion, and care that intrigued her deeply. One day, while walking around campus, Sarah received an unexpected message. "Are we going to have lunch tomorrow?" "Just a conversation. Nothing more." She hesitated. The invitation was casual, but it aroused a quiet tension. After considering the situation, he decided to accept. He wanted to understand Alex better, but without compromising his own independence. Lunch took place in a low-key restaurant, far from the center, in a quiet neighborhood. Alex seemed calm and focused, watching Sarah intently but respectfully. They talked about trivial matters, but they also touched on deeper themes: ambitions, personal challenges, interrupted dreams. Sarah realized that Alex was not interested in superficialities. He wanted to understand who she really was. During the conversation, Sarah mentioned the weight of taking care of her mother, the financial stress, and the responsibility of keeping everything running on her own. Alex listened attentively, without interruptions, just waving and asking careful questions. For Sarah, that attentive listening was unexpected. She didn't expect anyone in her financial circle to take such a genuine interest in someone else's reality. But at the same time, Sarah began to notice small nuances that bothered her. Some of Alex's decisions, small observations, revealed that he had access to information she didn't know she had shared. Nothing invasive, but enough to create a sense of subtle distrust. She couldn't determine if it came from his natural curiosity or something more strategic. From that point on, Sarah realized she needed to be alert. She could not afford total emotional vulnerability, as the line between trust and dependence could become dangerous. Still, something about Alex aroused a curiosity that went beyond simple financial interest. She began to question her own perceptions. Did he really act out of kindness, or was there some ulterior motive behind his generosity? In the following days, Sarah's routine returned to an almost normal rhythm. She studied, worked, and cared for her mother, but her mind was always partially occupied with Alex and the implications of what they had shared. Small details, a message, a suggestion, an offer of help, provoked in her a constant tension between gratitude, curiosity, and caution. As she watched Clara improve, Sarah felt a deep relief, but also the awareness that life would not return to the way it was before. Every future decision would be measured, weighed, and every step needed to be cautious. She knew that the relationship with Alex was not simple, that the agreement from the night before had created an unexpected and delicate emotional complexity. Sarah began to realize that while she had solved a pressing problem, new challenges would arise. The need to keep secret Alex's attention and his own moral conscience intertwined in a web of contradictory feelings. The poor young student was learning, the hard way, that decisions motivated by love and responsibility can have impacts that go far beyond the immediate situation. And so, life went on, seemingly normal, but with layers of tension, curiosity, and a growing sense that something greater was about to reveal itself. Sarah didn't know it yet, but she was about to discover that what seemed like a simple transaction would be the beginning of a series of events that would change her life in unexpected ways, and that the turnaround would be much closer than she imagined. Weeks passed, and Sarah continued to be torn between academic life, work, and caring for her mother. Clara was growing stronger, but Sarah knew that each victory had an emotional toll that had not yet been fully assessed. The young student began to realize that although she had resolved her immediate financial situation, her relationship with Alex Donovan had introduced a new kind of complexity into her life, a quiet tension that grew day by day. Alex continued to be present in a subtle way, sending messages almost daily. He asked about her mother, about her studies, and even about small details of her life that Sarah had not consciously shared. It was as if he was attentive to his every move, always respecting limits, but maintaining an almost invisible control over the situation. This attention, while respectful, made Sarah feel vulnerable and, at the same time, intrigued. One day, while working at the cafe, Sarah received an unexpected call. It was Alex. He suggested they meet to talk about a possible internship opportunity at his company, Donovan Enterprises. The proposal seemed genuine and professional, but Sarah felt a pang of concern. Accepting meant getting even closer to him and his world, which was completely different from his own. After pondering, he decided to accept. He knew that an internship opportunity at a renowned company could be the chance to transform his life in a legitimate way, without depending on extreme situations. But he was also aware that getting close to Alex could complicate his emotions and his independence. The meeting took place in the luxurious office of Donovan Enterprises, an imposing building in downtown Chicago. Alex greeted her with a cordial smile, introducing her to some members of the HR team. The conversation started professionally, with details about responsibilities, schedules, and expectations, but soon took an unexpected turn. Alex began to question Sarah about her life goals, her ambitions, and the challenges that she faced on a daily basis. He wasn't just interested in offering an internship. He seemed genuinely interested in understanding who she was, what she wanted, and how she dealt with difficulties. For Sarah, this approach was unexpected and, in some ways, disconcerting. As the conversation progressed, Sarah realized that there was something deeper in Alex than his public image as a wealthy and successful businessman. There was a quiet, almost careful attention that revealed real interest in their well-being and growth. But it also brought a dilemma. To what extent could she trust him without compromising her own autonomy? Over the next few days, Sarah began to notice changes in herself. He felt more confident, more aware of his abilities, and, at the same time, more emotionally vulnerable. Every message from Alex, every gesture of attention, provoked in her a mixture of gratitude and alertness. It was like walking a tightrope, balancing the need to protect his independence with the growing curiosity about who he really was. In the midst of this whirlwind of feelings, an unexpected challenge arose. During an academic meeting at the university, Sarah discovered that a classmate, known for his competitive behavior, had noticed the change in his financial life and began to speculate about the origin of his funds. Rumors began to circulate, and Sarah felt the weight of the silent judgment of colleagues who did not know the reality behind her decisions. She realized that although she had solved a critical problem, new pressures were emerging. The relationship with Alex, the internship, and the perception of others created a complex web of expectations and judgments. Sarah felt constantly on the edge between protecting her mother, maintaining her dignity, and navigating Alex's attention, which, while respectful, was persistent and engaging. At the end of that day, as she walked home, Sarah reflected on the situation. He knew he needed to stay focused on his goals. His mother's recovery, academic success, and building an independent life. But she also understood that Alex's presence, indirectly or directly, had introduced a new dimension into her life, a mix of opportunity and risk, trust and alertness. Sarah realized that the decision that night, made out of love and necessity, had opened doors she had never imagined, and that, for each opportunity, challenges would arise that would require courage, emotional intelligence, and determination. The poor young student was learning that in real life, difficult decisions don't disappear with a paycheck. They morph into new paths, each with its own risks and rewards. And so Sarah's routine continued, seemingly normal, but fraught with quiet tensions, veiled expectations, and the growing sense that the next steps she took could define not only her mother's future, but her own destiny. The following months brought an almost predictable routine for Sarah. She continued to study, work in the cafe, and take care of her mother, while the internship at Donovan Enterprises offered valuable experiences and learning opportunities. Despite this, a quiet tension hung in the air, linked to Alex's constant, if discreet, presence in his life. He continued to keep in regular contact, offering professional advice, praising his academic performance, and subtly showing interest in his personal situation. But Sarah began to notice small details that made her uneasy. Alex's business decisions that affected coworkers, observations about her personal life, and even comments about choices she didn't remember sharing. Nothing blatant, nothing too invasive, but enough to arouse suspicion. One day, while reviewing documents in the office of Donovan Enterprises, Sarah found a folder marked with her name in a reserved file. His heart raced. There was nothing explicit of invasion of privacy. Empty. He had a control she didn't fully understand. She decided not to confront him right away. He needed to observe, understand the limits of that relationship, and protect himself. Sarah noticed that while Alex was generous and caring, there were layers to his behavior that went beyond what was expected. Her every gesture carried multiple interpretations, and she needed to figure out which ones were genuine and which ones might hide strategic intentions. Meanwhile, Clara continued to improve. The treatment was progressing, and for the first time in months, Sarah was able to breathe more easily. However, the young woman also realized that life with a healthy mother did not lessen the emotional pressure. The responsibility of maintaining the family's financial and emotional stability still fell on her. Each decision required extreme care, and any mistake could have serious consequences. It was during this period that an unexpected event occurred. During an informal lunch at the office, Sarah met Mark Reynolds, a manager of a different department, who began to show interest in her. Initially, Mark's approach seemed casual, but it soon became apparent that he was trying to establish a closer relationship, apparently interested in the young woman for personal and professional reasons. Sarah realized that she needed to deal with this new dynamic without compromising her position or creating misunderstandings. Mark's presence brought new tensions and required her to balance her interactions while maintaining clear boundaries and preserving her emotional independence. At the same time, Alex began to suggest subtle changes to his routine at the stage. He would point out small strategic tasks, praise her performance in certain areas, and without realizing it, Sarah began to excel in some projects. It was evident that he saw potential in her, perhaps more than she herself believed she possessed. However, this attention added to the sense of mystery surrounding Alex. Why was he so interested in his academic and professional success? What was the true limit of his generosity? Sarah knew she needed to maintain an emotional distance, but her curiosity and admiration grew quietly. One late afternoon, while walking home, Sarah reflected on all the events. Life had been radically transformed since that decisive night. The money that saved her mother brought opportunities, but it also introduced complexities she had never imagined she would face. Alex's every gesture, every word, and every remark carried multiple meanings, and she knew she would need to be careful not to lose her own autonomy. Deep down, Sarah began to realize that she was approaching something bigger, a web of relationships, opportunities, and decisions that would require courage, insight, and determination. The poor young student who had made an extreme decision to save her mother was about to discover that life is made up of unexpected consequences, and that the mystery surrounding Alex Donovan was still far from being revealed. She didn't know it, but the next few weeks would bring events that would test not only her emotional intelligence, but also her ability to judge character and intentions. The balance between gratitude, caution, and curiosity would be put to the test in ways she could never have anticipated. The following months tested Sarah's emotional resilience in ways she could never have imagined. The internship at Donovan Enterprises kept her busy, involved in challenging projects, and under Alex's constant supervision. He remained attentive, present in a subtle way, always ready to guide and support, but at the same time maintaining a distance that provoked silent tension. Sarah began to realize that although she was growing professionally, the environment around Alex carried small tensions that could not be ignored. Colleagues watched their interactions, curious about the relationship between the young intern and the millionaire businessman. Small comments, looks, and gestures began to insinuate that there was something else going on, even though nothing had been stated. One day, while reviewing financial reports in the office, Sarah noticed a strange pattern. Some of the company's recent decisions had been made in ways that benefited certain departments but hurt others. Curious, she began to investigate discreetly, using the data and knowledge acquired in the internship. It was then that he noticed a small network of internal favors, apparently related to Alex's corporate politics. Nothing illegal in immediate legal terms, but there were questionable ethical decisions, subtle manipulations of results, and strategic advantages that were not apparent to everyone. Sarah felt a chill down her spine. For the first time, he realized that Alex's world was not only wealth, care, and generosity, but also an environment where power, strategy, and secrets intertwined. She began to question his real intentions. After all, was his personal attention purely altruistic, or was there a deeper strategic goal? Meanwhile, Clara continued her recovery, and Sarah felt relieved and happy to have fulfilled the promise she had made to her mother. However, Sarah herself began to realize that her emotional well-being was at stake. She found herself torn between admiration for Alex and the need to protect her independence while keeping her distance from the ethical and emotional tensions that arose. The situation became even more complicated when Mark Reynolds, a colleague at the university, intensified his attacks. He began to press Sarah for attention, offering academic and professional help, but in a way that came dangerously close to the emotional intimacy she needed to preserve for herself. Sarah realized that she had to deal with multiple layers of tension: her cautious relationship with Alex, Mark's insistent presence, and her own awareness of past choices. One late afternoon, Alex called her to a private meeting at the office. Sarah entered cautiously, but found a quiet environment, without explicit tensions. Alex greeted her cordially and began to explain a strategic project that involved sensitive company decisions. He spoke in detail, but also asked unexpected questions about her ethical and moral vision, trying to understand how she would react in the face of complex dilemmas. Sarah realized at that moment that Alex was testing not only his professional ability, but also his values. It was a delicate situation. Each answer had to be honest, but without revealing vulnerabilities that could be exploited. She responded carefully, showing determination and clarity, but also ethical discernment. Alex nodded, seemingly pleased, but something in his eyes indicated that he was evaluating more than just performance. That night, Sarah returned home reflecting deeply. The weight of his decision of the night that saved his mother became more and more present. What began as an act of desperation now had repercussions on his emotional, academic, and professional life. She realized that she was at a tipping point. Every step she took in the coming months could decisively define her future. And then, something unexpected happened. An anonymous message arrived at his university email, containing only a few cryptic lines, hinting that Alex Donovan might not be as transparent as he appeared. Nothing was directly accused, but the words suggested that Alex's past, present, and future decisions were shrouded in complexity and secrets yet to be revealed. Sarah felt a mixture of fear and curiosity. For the first time, he realized that history was about to take a completely unexpected turn. The mystery surrounding Alex, until then silent, began to reveal itself in layers that would require courage, intelligence, and careful analysis to be understood. She didn't know yet that, soon, all the elements she had ignored or superficially interpreted would come together in a twist that would change her view of Alex and her own life. The poor young student who had made an extreme decision to save her mother was now facing a new challenge. To find out who Alex Donovan really was and what intentions were hidden behind her generosity and constant attention, Sarah couldn't sleep. The last few weeks had been intense. The internship, Alex's attention, his mother's advances, the silent pressure from colleagues, and the anonymous message that hinted at secrets about Alex. Every detail of her life now seemed intertwined with decisions, observations, and mysteries she didn't yet understand. The next morning, she received an unexpected invitation to meet at Alex's main office. He asked him to go in person to discuss something important and confidential. Sarah's heart raced, mixing anxiety, curiosity, and caution. When she arrived, she was led to a discreet, silent, and well-lit room. Alex was there, but different from usual. There was seriousness in his gaze, something that broke the usual balance of cordiality and quiet attention. He asked her to sit down and began to speak directly. "Sarah, there's something you need to know about the circumstances that brought us together." She swallowed, hoping that he would clarify doubts about the internship or the company. But what came next completely surprised her. Alex explained that the previous night's proposal, the one that saved Sarah's mother, had not been just an isolated act of generosity. He knew her financial situation was critical because he had quietly investigated her family, not invasively, but as part of a personal effort to identify talented people facing extreme hardship. He had realized her courage, dedication, and responsibility in caring for her sick mother. Sarah was speechless. Everything she believed to have been just a desperate act now had another dimension. Alex revealed that, in fact, it wasn't just about paying a medical bill. He wanted to invest in the life of someone who demonstrated integrity, determination, and intelligence under pressure. Qualities he valued highly in his company and those close to him. She felt a mixture of relief, confusion, and disbelief. Every previous decision, every emotional strain, every silent observation of Alex, everything now made sense from a new perspective. He wasn't manipulating. He was offering a strategic opportunity to those who, in his view, deserved a real chance to change their lives. Sarah realized that she had judged the situation much more simplistically than she actually was. The fear, guilt, and tension she had carried in the previous weeks now mingled with an unexpected feeling, gratitude and genuine respect for Alex. She understood that her decision on the fateful night had been extreme, but not in vain. It served as a silent proof of his courage and determination. In the days that followed, Alex offered Sarah a concrete opportunity, a tenured position at Donovan Enterprises, overseeing strategic projects that involved important company decisions. He explained that he trusted her and wanted to see her grow professionally, without any emotional obligation beyond the responsibility she chose to take on herself. Sarah accepted it with caution, but also with renewed confidence. The opportunity represented not only professional growth, but also the chance to build a stable life for her and her mother. For the first time since it had all begun, she felt that she had control over her own story, without the feeling that she was being used or manipulated. At the same time, the relationship between Sarah and Alex gained new nuances. There was mutual trust, respect, and a quiet recognition of each other's worth. Emotional tension began to give way to a genuine connection based on admiration and integrity, without relying on prior expectations or obligations. The twist made Sarah realize that life, even in the most desperate moments, can open up unexpected paths. The extreme act he had done out of love for his mother did not define her in a negative way. On the contrary, he demonstrated his courage, resilience, and ability to make difficult decisions. And upon being recognized by Alex, she finally understood that her life was entering a phase of balance, opportunity, and real growth. And so, the mystery that surrounded her since the fateful night began to be clarified, showing that all is not as it seems. Some extreme situations, when motivated by love and responsibility, can reveal hidden values and talents, and open doors to a future that once seemed impossible. After Alex's revelation, Sarah's life began to change in a noticeable way, but not in an immediate or superficial way. The changes were subtle, everyday, and required her attention, discipline, and emotional intelligence. She returned to university with a new perspective. She studied with more focus, worked with more purpose, and above all, she understood that every action had lasting impacts on her life and the lives of the people she loved. The internship turned into an intense learning experience. Alex included her in strategic meetings, presenting real decision and management challenges, and valued her opinions. Sarah began to realize the impact of her choices, and the trust Alex placed in her increased her self-esteem. She felt like she was finally building something solid, based on merit, not despair or financial need. Meanwhile, Clara recovered faster and faster. Seeing her healthy mother brought Sarah a sense of deep relief, but it also made her reflect on the responsibilities she carried. Her life would no longer be just about surviving the day-to-day. Now it was about building a sustainable trajectory for herself and her family. At work, Sarah faced new challenges that tested not only her technical ability, but also her ethics and integrity. She had to deal with colleagues who, even without knowing about her previous relationship with Alex, tried to question her decisions or seek advantage in delicate situations. Sarah realized that the respect she had earned through hard work was different from what was received by financial merit. It was conquered with competence, discipline, and clarity of principles. At the same time, Alex maintained his posture as a low-key mentor, offering guidance and acknowledging achievements without encroaching on Sarah's autonomy. He showed that true trust is based on mutual respect, not on obligations or manipulations. This approach taught Sarah more than any previous class or experience, that personal and professional growth requires a balance between courage, ethics, and prudence. Outside of work, Sarah began to build a routine of emotional stability. She bought some books, resumed hobbies she had put aside, and started to dedicate quality time to her mother, now healthy. Every moment she spent with Clara was cherished, and Sarah felt deep gratitude for having made the extreme decision that saved her life and brought new opportunities. Mark Reynolds, who had previously pushed for attention and closeness, noticed the change in Sarah. She, now more secure and assertive, has established clear limits, maintaining healthy professional and personal relationships. This new posture demonstrated maturity, showing that the young woman did not need to depend on external validation to feel confident in herself. In the professional environment, Sarah began to influence small strategic decisions, showing analytical skills, ethics, and practical vision. Alex watched with satisfaction, realizing that his bet had been the right one. The young woman who had faced an extreme moment of despair was now turning difficulties into opportunities, making decisions that reflected intelligence, resilience, and moral judgment. Each day, Sarah felt her life stabilize. The mystery surrounding Alex had been clarified, but the connection built between them remained based on respect and admiration, without emotional pressures. This relationship, now healthy, functioned as support and stimulus, and not as an obligation. At the university, colleagues began to notice his change in attitude. Sarah was seen as someone who was centered, reliable, and competent, not just because of Alex's support, but because of the effort and courage she showed on a daily basis. She had built a solid reputation based on merit and character, transforming the perception that could previously be skewed by superficial judgments. At home, Clara finally returned to her normal, active, and independent routine. Seeing her mother recovered reinforced in Sarah the certainty that each sacrifice had been worth it. And most of all, the young woman understood that real life is not about isolated gestures of extreme necessity, but about how we transform every decision, even difficult ones, into learning, growth, and real opportunities. Sarah was now ready to move on to new challenges, maintaining the clarity of her values, personal determination, and confidence built through experiences that, while extreme, revealed her strength and ability. The poor young student who had faced an impossible dilemma now found herself transformed into a woman capable of controlling her destiny, protecting her family, and embracing opportunities that had previously seemed inaccessible. With the turnaround revealed and confidence restored, Sarah began to realize that life could be built in a balanced way, even after extreme decisions. The internship was consolidated as a transformative experience. She now participated in strategic projects, contributed to important company decisions, and was recognized for her competence, ethics, and emotional intelligence. Each approved report, each successful project reinforced the confidence Alex placed in her, but also her own confidence in her abilities. The relationship between Sarah and Alex had morphed into something unique, a connection based on mutual respect, admiration, and quiet support. He remained an attentive mentor, but he never crossed boundaries. Sarah, in turn, maintained emotional and professional independence, learning to value not only the opportunities offered, but also her own ability to face challenges and transform them into growth. Her colleagues at university and work began to notice significant changes in her. Some who had previously speculated about his financial life now noted his maturity, his firm stance in the face of ethical dilemmas, and his ability to deal with complex pressures. Sarah became a reference for other interns, not for connections or favors, but for her own competence and discernment. Mark Reynolds, who had previously tried to approach insistently, finally understood the limits Sarah had set. She handled the situation firmly and respectfully, making it clear that her focus was on personal, academic, and professional growth. This episode reinforced his ability to maintain control over his own life, protecting relationships and avoiding unnecessary interference. In parallel, Clara fully resumed her healthy and active routine. The tranquility at home allowed Sarah to breathe and consolidate her focus, without the constant weight of fear of losing her mother or the dire need for resources. Seeing her mother smile again and participate in life with full energy was one of the greatest rewards of her trajectory so far. In the workplace, Sarah began to perceive opportunities for leadership and real influence. Alex trusted her, and she was ready to make strategic decisions autonomously, applying the ethics and values she had always cherished. Each successful action consolidated his respect within the company and strengthened his own perception of capacity and worthiness. Despite the growing stability, the young woman has not lost awareness that her trajectory began with an extreme decision. The experience shaped his worldview, teaching him that courage, responsibility, and, which initially brought guilt and tension, now became a learning experience and emotional strength. Alex, for his part, remained a low-key ally, encouraging but not pressuring. The relationship between the two has stabilized in a healthy balance: trust, respect, and mutual recognition. No gesture, no word needed to carry ulterior motives. Everything worked with transparency and maturity. In the last semester of internship and university, Sarah began to prepare for the future. He knew that new opportunities would arise, and that what he had built so far, confidence, ethics, skills, and emotional stability, was the basis for conscious, independent decisions. She was now able to turn any challenge into learning, consolidating her personal and professional trajectory. Sarah's story began with an extreme act driven by love for her mother, but culminated in growth, learning, and independence. Every difficulty faced, every emotional strain overcome, and every professional challenge contributed to transforming a desperate situation into a realistic and inspiring trajectory of success. The last semester of university was coming to an end. Sarah had gained emotional stability, professional growth, and a relationship of mutual respect with Alex Donovan, built not on obligation or interest, but on trust and recognition of individual worth. Every challenge faced since that decisive night had shaped his character and set the stage for the future. At work, she excelled in strategic projects that directly impacted Donovan Enterprises' bottom line. His ability to analyze complex situations, deal with ethical dilemmas, and make smart decisions caught the attention of the board. Alex, satisfied, recommended that she be considered for a permanent position within the company, an opportunity that no one else would have secured based on simple merit and ethics. Meanwhile, at home, Clara enjoyed full health. Seeing her mother smile again, participate in activities that were previously impossible, and resume her normal routine brought Sarah a sense of completeness and deep relief. The extreme act he had done to save his mother now became a memory of strength, courage, and love, no longer guilt or despair. The final surprise came on a Friday afternoon. Sarah received an official invitation to join the Strategic Projects Board of Donovan Enterprises, with real autonomy and decisive responsibilities. More than a position, it represented full confidence in his ability, recognition of his courage and dedication, and a concrete opportunity to transform his future. But there was something even more unexpected. Alex invited her to a private meeting. Sarah arrived cautiously, ready to listen to instructions or advice. However, Alex began with sincere and simple words. "Sarah, you have shown me something rare: courage, integrity, and genuine dedication. More than deserving an opportunity, you deserve to choose the path you want to follow, without pressure or expectations. What happened that night didn't define who you are, but it did reveal your strength. And that's what matters most." Sarah felt a surge of relief and recognition. For the first time, she realized that her personal history was not marked by despair or extreme choices, but by growth, merit, and the ability to transform challenges into real achievements. The poor young student who made a desperate decision to save her mother was now at a point of balance. Guaranteed family health, consolidated professional growth, well-deserved recognition, and autonomy over her own life. Every gesture, every tension, every challenge had contributed to her becoming stronger, more independent, and more aware of her worth. And, in the final instant, something surprising happened. Alex offered not only the position, but also the possibility of partnering on a project she would choose to lead. There were no personal expectations other than confidence in his competence. Sarah finally understood that real life is not made up of isolated acts of courage, but of the ability to transform challenges into learning and opportunities. The mystery that had surrounded her since that fateful night had been revealed, but in a positive way. Not everything that seems extreme or desperate is negative. Sometimes, difficult decisions reveal talents, character, and paths that once seemed impossible. Sarah smiled, realizing that, more than surviving, she had grown, earned respect and stability, and was ready to write her own story with determination, courage, and wisdom. The trajectory that began with an extreme decision, driven by love for the mother, ended in learning, autonomy, and concrete opportunities, showing that real life is complex, but also surprising and fair for those who face their challenges with integrity and courage.